Helpful to you. One of them is natural church development. Have you ever heard of natural church development? Natural church development is an organization that did an extensive search worldwide. And what they did is they did a survey and they processed a lot of information worldwide in every country, continent, that kind of thing. And they put together this massive database to find out what makes a church healthy. And they, when they put that information together, they found that there were basically 8 key sections that every church had in common that was healthy, had nothing to do with your size. So I give you this natural church development. You can Google it, you search it on the internet. And what you can do is they've got a little book for it. You can read about the book and you can learn some things about the importance of children's ministry, worship, evangelism, this kind of thing. And the reason our lights have gone out twice is our lighting system doesn't know that we're having a service on a Thursday. It's totally out of sync. And so they have a little override in the sound booth and hey, welcome. They turn it and it lasts for 2 hours. Tick, 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 tick. So every 2 hours lights are going to go out if they don't remember to turn them back on. Because it was an oversight. We didn't think about the lighting system. So natural church development. Another one is called, this is a website, thepastorsgathering.com. This is the one I told you about. It's at the Rock Church in San Bernardino. They're going to be doing a free pastors conference. It's in May and it's free to the pastor and to the spouse. And then it's like $50 for each staff member if you brought other people from your church. But the senior pastor, and it is 2.5 days. They serve you lunch and dinner. And it is excellent for resources, but I believe you need to follow the wisdom that Carl gave. You need to go there realizing they are a mega church. They're a church of 20,000. Their sanctuary seats over 3,000. And so you need to take the part that you know will fit your size church and learn from it because you can, and it can be very, very helpful. The other day, there's a one-day seminar that's coming up at Mariners Church in Huntington Beach. It's called How to Protect Your Church. It's a whole day seminar that I believe it's in the month of May. You could research it. Look up Mariners Church in Huntington Beach. They're doing a seminar on what to do in your church for an active shooter, what to do, how to secure your church, how to make your church safe, that kind of thing. It's an important topic today. Then TechSoup.org is your friend. How many have never heard of TechSoup? Never heard of it? Okay, I am giving you a piece of gold right now. TechSoup.org is an organization that helps nonprofit organizations get hardware and software at a major discount. You have to go through the hoops to prove you're a 501c3. You have to have the documentation, you have to send it in, but once you are approved, there is all kinds of software that you can get and hardware, if you would like, that is huge, beneficial to you. For an example, did you know Microsoft is your friend? Microsoft Office 365, if you get authorized, if you become a recognized 501c3 through TechSoup, you can buy Microsoft Office 365 through TechSoup. Get this, Microsoft gives churches, this is a big deal, Microsoft gives churches free online Microsoft Office 365. If you go through TechSoup and you are an authorized nonprofit organization, you can get 350 accounts for free for an Office account. 350 accounts. Our church has a website called churchofgrace.com. Our emails are all churchofgrace.com. I can have 350 free accounts with an email of churchofgrace.com through Microsoft 365. Not only is that you get those accounts for free, you get their cloud-based software for free, their whole Office 365 software for free. If you decide you want it downloaded onto your laptop, you can get it for $2 a month. per account, $24 a year. If you wanted the hardware downloaded, 2 years. We use Microsoft Office 365. It is our key process. In the account that you get your email, you get access to the Office. You also, to Office 365, PowerPoint, Excel, Word, that kind of thing. You also get 15 trigabytes, is it trigabytes? Terabytes. 15 terabytes of cloud storage for free for each account. Microsoft likes churches. So now the next one is Adobe. Adobe doesn't like churches. They do not like churches. They do not, in their documentation, they say they will not give a church a discount. But if you go through TechSoup and you have been recognized that you're a 501c3, you can buy Creative Cloud through Adobe, which is all the Adobe products. All of them, you can buy it through TechSoup at a starting price of $19.99, $20 a month, and then you can move up to $29 a month, and the average person, it's $50 or $60 a month for the Creative Cloud program. So what we did as a church, and when you have one account with Adobe, it allows you to download the software onto two different computers. So we have 2 accounts with Adobe with the software on 4 separate computers, and 4 different people are using them. Just some resources that I thought might be beneficial. We have more, but we don't have time. We're going to do questions and answer. Come on up, guys. Okay, do we have somebody in the house? Josh, are you in the house with the microphone? Do you got a microphone for him, Hector? And what they're going to do is they're going to run over to you with the microphone. Here, there is one up here, Hector. Do you have a mic? You guys got, they have mic, and your mics are on? Hey, Hector, there's one here with a white label. Yeah, and this one.
Printing of bulletins and postcards.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I totally forgot. The way we print them so inexpensively is, and this is something like it was Carl, what can you do well and just keep doing it? We stumbled onto this by accident. We found out of there are these giant printing houses and big printing houses where they do mass printing. And they take lots of clients and they print them all at the same time. And they have a lot of different kinds of stock paperwork and stuff you can do. You have to do the artwork. You have to create the PDF. And you upload the PDF to their website. Well, they don't sell to the public. They only sell to printers or print brokers. What happens, we have in our church, and for a while he was on our board, he's a print broker. And I went to him and I said, can you get me an account with this company? And the company's called 4 Over. That's the name of the company that we have an account with. It's called 4 Over. And they sell to the middleman who sells to the end user. So the gentleman went with his company and he connected and got an account through 4 Over, gave us the account. So we do all our church printing through that account, and what we are getting broker prices. We're not paying the end price for it. We have done things that are just incredibly cheap. You saw the A-frame sign that we had it on there, and it said thriving for 300, under 300, and had an arrow, or I think directing you into this room and stuff like that. We did that through 4 Over, and I think that's what I thought. $8? $8 a sign. $8 a sign. I told my wife, because she does the Adobe stuff, she does a lot of the design work and things for our church. I said, we should start a business for churches just to publish their stuff because we have this connection. So I say to you, if you have a connection with a printer, with a broker, with a printer broker, someone that you order stuff through or something like that, go to them and ask them, hey, can you get me an account? And if you have that kind of relationship. And so we were able to, we have that, and we're utilizing it. And we, those stickers that say 300 on them, and they're on your little gift bag, we ordered those, and there's minimum, I think we had to order 50? Was that what we ordered? No. How many of the stickers did we order? Around 250. We had to order 250, and it cost us $50. The issue is, if you're local, because this 4 Over is in Glendale, they're also in Phoenix, they're also in Seattle, they're also in Chicago. It's a big company. But because I'm close enough to Glendale, they'll deliver it to my house for free. So we order it on Monday, we have it by Friday, most of the stuff.
How do you spell 4 Over?
The number 4, over, Over. You can research it, or like just Google it, it'll come up with their website. But as an organization, we were not able to get an account with them. It had to be someone who has a business. So start a business, start a printing business, get it legalized, get a number, a corporate number or something, and then open an account. Super cheap. Isn't that awesome? Okay, questions? Josh, you'll have to run.
Do you have staff, paid staff? And if so, how did you determine when to start having paid staff?
You get to go.
I think on that, I have some staff. They're not full pay. There's stipends and stuff like that. What you do is you figure out what your key need is. That's where you go. A lot of times it says youth pastor, and I believe in youth. I cut my teeth on that. But that may not be the first one. You've got to assess the needs where you're at, and then start going with that. And then even the people you have around it, because it gets back to you. You just can't put out an open resume and get 50,000 people to sign up, and then you pick through it. I mean, it's a process. So who have you been training up in that, and then how do we keep them around? That's kind of the way we approach it.
We have 2 paid staff, me and my now lead pastor. He was my youth pastor for 25 years. He became the lead pastor 7 weeks ago, and I now work for him. I'm now the teaching pastor. So we just switched roles for reasons that we won't go into now, but we're still there at the church. But back to like the story that I told where we were staffing for 600, a big part of the reason that whole thing didn't work was because once we got to 400, we had not discipled our own people to do the leadership as the church grew. So we had to hire experts in from the outside, and they came in not knowing our culture, not understanding the church. It didn't go well, especially when you got to bring in a couple people right away because of the size of the growth. If we were to have that kind of growth now, we would not have to hire anybody in from the outside because we are continually training up our own staff in order to take those positions over. Everybody has a redundancy. And it takes a long time to get there, but you've got to start by what I call the pastoral prime mandate, Ephesians 4, verses 11 and 12. The fivefold ministry gifts, their job is to equip the saints to do the work of ministry, not to do the work of ministry for them. But we've got a church culture that's set up that basically goes the opposite of that. The way our churches are set up basically tell the people, you pay me, and I'll visit the orphans and widows for you. You pay me, I'll study the Bible for you. You pay me, I'll be holy for you. Right? We even call ministers like holy men. Like, aren't we all supposed to be? Right? But we've got our system is actually saying the opposite of what our theology states. So we've got to change our systems so that people know. I tell our congregation on a regular basis, you do not pay me to do ministry for you. God has called me to equip you to do ministry for each other and for the community. And we've just started to seed that into the way we do things. And so now we're raising up a generation of leaders, and we could double in the next 20 months like we did before and do it well and be able to handle all the capacity and not have it overwhelm the pastoral staff because we can raise up our own people. Some of them would go from volunteer to part-time pay. Some would go from part-time pay to full-time pay, but it's all our own folks, and they are ready to step up. We minister to the 150 people we have, but we are systematically ready to be a church of 300. So minister to your current size, put your systems in place for double your size. And even if you don't double, you've then got breathing space in your systems. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, they had these really fast cars and they could go this and that amount of time. And my brother, my cousin who loved cars, I went to him, why do you have a car that he can even go 150 miles an hour? You're not allowed to go faster than 55, back when I was a kid, right? That was the speed limit. He goes, because if you drive your Pinto 55 miles an hour for 3 hours, you'll kill your Pinto. I can drive my car 55 miles an hour from now till Jesus comes, and it'll be fine because it has the capacity. So when we train our own people up, we increase our capacity for growth, for other kinds of ministry. That's what we've got to be doing in order to be ready for that. And then you can hire your staff out of that even. Sometimes it's appropriate to bring somebody in if you've got a particular expertise, or if you're maybe needing to have a new vision, somebody seeing it through new eyes. But most of us should be raising our farm teams.
That's right.
Next question. Yes. The reason we're putting it on a microphone is that this is being recorded so that people can hear the question as well.
Okay, cool. How often do you, or do you talk about money on a Sunday morning? I ask this question because there's people in our church that want to know, and there's people in our church that don't want to know. Or maybe they do want to know, but they don't really, I don't know. But, the counsel is so varied. I mean, I've had pastors come to me and go, you need to teach on tithing, you need to do that. And I'm like, okay. But then I have guys come to me in our church and they say, Mike, where are we financially? So do you talk about that on a Sunday morning? Not talk about it and make a big thing, or do you make a big thing? That's what I'm just wondering.
For years I didn't talk enough about it, and I wasn't pastoring my church properly, because that is an important aspect of Scripture and of biblical discipleship and stewardship. And a few years ago, there was a little trigger in my head that went off that now I love talking about it. Was what I changed from was, I am not there to try to get money out of them or to convince them to become givers. I now go in with the approach that these people are at church because they want to be there, because there's no law that says they have to show up. If they're in the building, they're there voluntarily. I go in with the assumption that they want to give, they just don't know how. And so if I start with that assumption, rather than trying to force them to, rather than doing a big pitch, I assume you want to, let me give you the tools so that you can. And when you do it with that heart, people are ready to hear it, because they hear from you that you're coming in with tools and not with begging and not with manipulation. So that's really helped us.
I answer the question with a question. And that is, do you tithe?
Yes.
Because you don't have the right to ask for their tithe if you don't tithe. And I am shocked at how many pastors I've found, senior pastors, who don't tithe. I don't get it. At the age of 21, I began to tithe. And I found out about tithing for the first time in my life at 21. I did not know that I was going to be a pastor. I didn't know I was called to the ministry. And I began to tithe because I believed in it. So I am a believer in tithing as an act of worship, as an act of responsibility, and an act of maturity, of being a believer. I believe that you tithe to your local church. I have always believed that, and so I preach it that way with passion. But I'm like Carl, that I preach tithing because I know how it has blessed my life. Therefore, I want your life to be blessed. I talk about money without a problem. I don't have an issue of talking about money. I'm very, very comfortable talking about it, but I never, ever, ever, ever soak people for an offering, pull it out of them, close the door, you're not leaving until you give more. I don't do that. I just tell my story, that how tithing has changed my life and how I have found fulfillment in being a giver, and how my life has been blessed because of that, and I want it for you. I teach it probably every couple of years. I'll do a series on tithing, but throughout the entire year, I throw it in here and there. It's not a series. I just talk about it. I more or less present it in other topics and other subjects to support that topic or that subject.
Well, because money touches every aspect of our lives, so there's always a place where you can talk about it in the natural flow of the conversation. Yeah.
But I'm not one that's going to, you better tithe, you better do this. Years ago, I heard John Maxwell say this. It was at one of our denominational conferences. I'd never heard of John Maxwell. He was a speaker that day, and then I started following some of his leadership things, and he made the statement of the 90-day pledge, and I started doing that. Years ago, I stood up and I did a series on tithing, and then I had a pledge card. I said, if you will pledge to tithe for 90 days, if you will give faithfully for 90 days your tithe, and at the end of 90 days, if you feel like you did not get blessed, that God did not keep his word, I will refund you all your tithe. You keep a record of it, you prove it, and I will write you a check for what you gave over that 90 days. I've had hundreds of people sign that pledge. Not one person's come and asked for the money. Because I believe God's word is true.
It's just healthy discipleship. It gets back to our motives. I mean, if our motives, we got this project, we got to make this happen, we're panicked. If it's because bills are short, if we haven't been generous with our congregation because we're nickeling and diming them, here's so much for this, here's so much for this, it's hard to ask. But it's basic discipleship. It's healthy to be able to ask. It's what they should do. It's the 101 of faith. It's the level 1 in the video game. All right?
Yeah.
If you don't learn to bounce and do that, you're going to get killed in level 2 or 3. It's the same thing spiritually. If you haven't learned to give, that's where you learn the consistency and the faith and confidence you can get in God coming through in the details. So you have to teach about it. I mean, we talk about it every week, but it's a subtle way. Every week I challenge 3 groups. I say, 1, be a part. If you've never given anything, be a part. You know? The next thing it says, be blessed. When you get to the 10%, God does something. It's another dynamic left there. Be blessed. Become like Jesus. He was generous in everything that he did. It's the model that we have to be. So it's a matter of something, talking to people consistently and not feeling like you're trying to pull out money all the time.
Yeah. Another question. I would think hands are just flying up. Way over here.
While you're going there, one of the things I also do is I try to emphasize generosity, not just money.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about generosity of spirit and of your time and of your energies, right. So that because generosity, people are attracted to generosity and want to be generous, and that breaks down the barriers. The money is the hardest thing to get out of them. They'll usually give their time before their money. Right. But if there is a spirit of generosity, that changes things, and that's the goal anyway. We don't want churches that just give a lot of money. We want generous people.
The question I had was that a couple of you talked about having higher numbers of people in your churches, and at some point, your numbers started to decline. And so I was wondering, what were some of the warning signs that you maybe saw but didn't act on when the numbers started to drop? And if you had acted on them or had thought about it, what would you have done differently so that the numbers wouldn't have dropped so drastically?
Ours happened so fast there was no warning. It was 10 months from 400 to under 100. It was just it was just scramble to try to figure out what it is. I didn't see it coming at all. I wish I had some help for you, but it blindsided me.
Anybody else?
Oh, it was his story. I can't answer for him. Well, mine.
Yeah, and yours was the divorce.
Yeah, mine was easy to tell. I went from 1,000 people to under 150 over 3 years, 36 months. That's really a long, drawn-out torture. You felt like you were being, stretched on a rack every single Sunday. It was not fun, to go to church because you thought, okay, that's all we lost. Then you lost some more, and you lost some more, you lost some more, kind of thing. And mine was because I went through a divorce. And by going through the divorce, people took sides. And people want to know what's going on. And here's what went wrong in my divorce. The board of directors of the church knew everything. They knew everything. And they chose to not tell the congregation anything. And they should have told the congregation everything. The board of directors, I invited them into my private life and said, investigate us, investigate me. When they did, and they went into our life, they interviewed my ex-wife, they interviewed me, they talked to other people, they found out everything. When they concluded this, they even sent my ex-wife to a psychiatrist, and then they put me on a 4-month sabbatical, and they went through our lives with a fine-tooth comb, came at the end and said, we don't see that you've done anything wrong. We don't see that you are disqualified for being our pastor. We want you to stay our pastor. We see that there are some issues in her life. Later in life, several years later, she ended up in prison. She ended up in prison for sexually molesting her 8-year-old son that she had after our marriage. So she had a lot of mental issues, a lot of other issues that went that direction. But what happened is the board knew, and their stance that they did, because they weren't experienced, they didn't understand church work and didn't understand the dynamics of the congregation, they said, we're not going to say one negative word about her. We're not going to say anything wrong. We're just going to have the congregation pray for you guys. They told me, we don't want you to say anything publicly. And I didn't for 15 years. Didn't say a word. Didn't say one negative word. What you just heard me say only came out about 5 years ago. If it was even 5 years ago. But what happened is they thought the congregation couldn't handle the truth, and they were completely wrong. When you don't give the congregation truth, it leaves a place for them to imagine the worst. What they should have done is just tell them what we're going through, what's happening, what's taking place, and take them through every step of the way and let them make an educated decision. But because they were not knowing what was happening, they listened to rumors, they listened to false things, they had some thoughts in their head, is the way it was. So that is how we lost. When I look back on it, I would handle it completely different. I would have the board treat the congregation as if they are mature adults and treat them like they can handle truth and expose the truth and let it be out and talk about it and let people pray through it and process it. That's what I would have done differently. That was 25 years ago. I'm here 25 years later. I'm still in the ministry. The devil didn't win. I love my life. All my kids love me. We now have 7 grandchildren, and we're their favorite grandparents because we tell them we are. And so God has redeemed what I lost in that sense. But I think that we should treat our congregation like they are educated, mature adults, and they can handle truth.
To piggyback on that, we've moved from an era that was fairly automatically trusting figures of authority to an era where we automatically distrust people in positions of authority. And so silence sounds like deceit.
Yeah.
In that environment. So we used to say, it's on a need to know basis. Now you need to assume that everybody needs to know everything unless they shouldn't. And because there are certain confidences that need to be kept and so on. But an attitude of transparency needs to just simply be a part of the way church does things now, because we got to break down those distrust barriers.
We publish, I'm sorry, Randy. Right. We publish annually a financial report. We said, here's how much money came into the church. Here's what was spent in the different categories. Here's how much money went to missions. Here's how much money's left. Our church, another thing on money is your church has to be a giver into missions. We give anywhere from 11 to 17% every year into missions. So we're actually a very big missions giving church. We don't talk a lot about it, but we give a lot of money into missions. And in that, but we think people can handle. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine, the one I mentioned in Monrovia, who has a church of 800, and I was telling him what we did publish it. His first response from his associate pastor was, "Oh, we can't do that. They couldn't handle how much it takes to operate a church." And my response was, from 25 years ago, no, you need to treat them like they're they're mature adults. They can handle it.
The one thing I would say is that what Carl shared earlier about the strength of the small church, it's also corporately strong, but individually it's real fragile. It doesn't take much for you to get out of sync. And I think where one of the things we teach in security is that oftentimes problems have happened because you just walked right into them. You weren't even aware or even thinking something. And I think that awareness comes from the Holy Spirit. And I think that goes back to really how much time we're spending in prayer, because God wants to tell you what's going on. God wants to prepare you. And so the more we can increase prayer, I think is a way that we can counter surprises or unawareness. And I'm not just doing that as a simple thing. I've just found that the more we pray as a church, the more we're alert to things, or individuals being upset, or some of the things that could just go all wrong all of a sudden, and we get heads up knowledge. And so we're working on it versus it's a total surprise blitz from the back.
Yeah, which goes to my answer. It surprised me because I wasn't looking for the problems. I was just merrily skipping along, assuming everything was great. Because it's growing, everything's awesome. And now I never assume everything's great. I always assume there's a problem somewhere, and I'm going to be the one to dig it out before it comes to me.
Satan's faithful too.
What's that?
Satan's faithful too.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
He's going to stay right after you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Up here?
Thank you. I'm going to dive into the salary question. I don't like the word bivocational. I think I am what would we consider bivocational, but it's an integral part of my ministry. I'm a public school teacher during the week, and a lot of ministry has flown through that. So
And they have a good retirement plan.
They do have a good retirement plan, and after doing it for 20 years, they have a pretty good salary plan too, if you're consistent. So, but as I make the transition toward full-time ecclesial ministry, could you just speak to confirm or correct regarding maybe some of the ways we're thinking about our salary formulas, the priorities of salaries in your experience in terms of who you bring on, in terms of worship, leadership, which is a specialty, or administrative assistants and things like that. Just speak to salaries, including the lead pastor salary, and some of the formulas and experience and priorities, if you would.
Great question.
I would say you have to start with your budget. I mean, the reality is you can't, 75% of your budget can't go to staff, and you still be a church that's going to be growing, or you're going to be able to relocate or do any of those things. And so there's some simple things that are involved in that. And I think part of the process, especially when we're growing and we're small, is that what we want to pay, what Terry and I want to pay our staff, is just not possible. Right now, I'm not paid. And I deliberately did that so we can afford the outrageous building costs that we have every month. And so I'm bivocational. So it's a tough one when you're small. When you're a certain size, you got a certain budget. Yeah, you can kind of figure out the math and look at some things. But before then, it's really a walk of faith. God, what are you asking? What God has asked me to do for this time period, He is blessed. But I knew He asked me to do it, and it's just something I'm not doing out of panicking or any of those other things. So I think one of the steps that's missed in that question, though, is the faithfulness of people growing up. There used to be a generation when we grew up. I mean, you're abused and ran hard and never wiped down. That's just the way you treated staff. And now there's kind of an we really want to treat them well. We really want to know they're loved and do the things. What can we do? People will work for more things than compensation. There's actually 7 different things out there that people will take, whether it's time with you, whether it's recognition. There's a lot of things that people will value over that. The people serving here today didn't do it because they got a paycheck, It was because they valued what they're doing. They saw it was important what they're doing. So raising up a generation of people realizing, hey, just, you're now the pastor and we're just going to hand you a check. Cuts out part of the growth process, cuts out some of the things. I speak to this only from the guilt a senior pastor could have. It's like, it's not enough. If it's what God's given you, then it's enough.
Yeah, we have to work really hard on figuring out as many ways as possible to offer non-monetary compensation, because the base of giving is just changing right now. For 5 years in a row, our church lost money every year until we lost over a third of our annual income while we were growing numerically, because we were getting younger. And kids just don't have the money. Even if they're tithing on next to nothing. And so here this church is getting stronger, healthier, bigger, and every year, less money, less money, less money. We lost over a third of our annual income in a 5-year span, until last year when we finally righted the ship and actually got a little bit higher than the previous year. So we were able to do that. But what we've had to learn is you just have to do more with less. And so you have to do things that are non-monetary to compensate people. Simple things like thank yous and giving them authority to go along with their responsibility and asking them, what are your gifts? What are your dreams? What do you want God to do in your life, and how can we help you do that, rather than just simply saying, here's the church's vision, you got to pitch in on that. And the smaller the church is, the more you can do that, the more you can go to individuals and say, what do you do and how can we help you with that? So for instance, if you're going to do outside the walls ministries at the church, one of the things that we do in Costa Mesa, there are 3 different apartment complexes owned by a group, not even a Christian ministry, that helps rescue women and children from abusive relationships. And they house over 20 families in each of their centers. So over 60 families are housed there, women and children. And they're secretive. When we go there, they give us a piece of paper that tells us how to get there. And when we get there, we have to hand them the piece of paper so that it doesn't get out, so that the abusers don't find them. So it's that secretive. And the reason we do that is because somebody who had been abused, was helping with them, came to me and said, I've got a real heart for this. Is there anything the church can do for this? We sat down with them. They're not Christian. They won't let us witness. They won't let us send a van to pick up the women, because a guy in a panel van is not a good thing for a house for abused women to show up in, right? And we just said, well, it's widows and orphans. Sounds like Jesus. We're going to do it. And because a woman in our church was doing it already, and because she'd already partnered with another woman in our church, we took the 2 of them, brought them on stage on Sunday, and said, right now we are looking for ways to do outreach into our community. These women that you already know are already doing it. And one of them told her story of abuse and rescue. And that afternoon, we had, I think, 20 people from the church who showed up. And now we are the most consistent on-site helpers that they have from any organizations anywhere. And it only costs us energy. It doesn't cost us any money, because they get monetary donations. They get furniture donated. They've got all this stuff, but they didn't have a staff to coordinate staging the apartments and putting the clothes together in the right sizes for the women when they came in, because it was just crammed into these warehouses. So we just provided the elbow grease. And it started because women in our church had a burden for it, and people got behind it. So they're doing active ministry on a large scale, and most churches that are going to have an outreach ministry of that size would have to hire a person. But we don't have to, because the volunteers in our church are so passionate about it. So, and because we valued their idea for ministry, rather than saying, no, you got to come along with a program that already exists here. So if they know their ministry can be used, if they have authority that goes along with the responsibility, if they get thanked all the time, and you said there were 7, there are others like that, where we've got to increase the non-monetary compensation. We've got to stop thinking we can fix it by throwing money at the problem, because the money just isn't there anymore.
Years ago, I heard a successful pastor make the statement that you don't go into full-time ministry until the full-time ministry can pay your full-time bills. So that would be step 1. And this is, when it comes to finances, I think there's where you can learn a lot from mega churches. For an example, Church of the Highlands, Chris Hodges in Birmingham, Alabama. His financial plan that he tells churches, and it's very, very sound, is you take last year's income, and this year's budget is only 90% of your last year's income. Yeah. You have a 10% buffer. You could lose the 10% and still be able to pay your bills and things. They have a formula too that right now the average church, especially in California, 50% of its income is going to a building. And it should never go beyond 50%. And they try to stay within 25% of your income for salaries. So if your 25% of your income is X dollars, then that's what you can pay for salaries. You've got 10% going into missions, 10% going into savings, 50% going to your building, 25% going into salaries. You have another 15 to 20% that has to do with ministry. And on a small church budget, you know, you have to stretch that out and figure that out like these gentlemen have said.
Bottom line is there are no formulas anymore. It's really individualized.
Yes.
Hi, my name is James. I pastor in Long Beach, and I have the same church size as all of you, and I feel like I'm like the shepherding kind of small church pastor. You know, real one-on-one discipleship. You know, for Presbyterians, we baptize, we marry, and we bury. That's the kind of tradition that I'm from. And so I feel like the small church dynamics that I'm a part of, I feel like our church is only as strong as our weakest members. And we have folks in our church who are the complete, you know, passive. You know, they come in, they worship for an hour and a half that we have service, and they're right out the door. And they're members of our church, and they're probably part of that, you know, large number at any particular time that aren't at the church for whatever reason, which I'm sure is the same across the board. How do you approach trying to get it, you know, helping them in their discipleship, helping them grow? How can you disciple them when you know, to be inside or to be connected with the church more than an hour and a half is like too much for them, and yet they still call themselves members of your church? How would you? I would love to get some of your wisdom on that.
This may seem backwards, but when you understand Scripture, it's always done backwards. It's to pray the Lord of the harvest to send forth laborers. All right? He didn't say pray that we can go harvest all the fields that he saw and was pointing out. He says we need the laborers. So I think one of the things that I would do is I'd start focusing on those that are willing to go deeper, and who are you mentoring? I mean, we do a monthly thing at our church where I have recognized several different people, and they show up. We read through a book. It's like a 3-hour class that we do. They can bring questions. We talk about the topic. Then there's something I want to bring and talk about. We have a time of prayer together. When you start raising up the level of leaders and stuff like that, they'll connect other people and draw other people and pull other people. When they see that happening, it causes everyone to step up a level. So it's important to have levels. You know, you got to recognize the fact that you got everyone there on Easter. They're not going to be there the next week because you mess up their schedule. Some of them are used to coming once a year, and you just played that card. Someone once every 6 months, and you just played that card. You know, some come once a month, and you played that card. So, you know, it's good to have levels. When you don't have levels, when everyone's up here, then you got another problem. So that's how I would start offering things where people can take a step, where you raise the bar a little bit, and they can take another level.
It is a challenge to get people who have been passive for a long time to become active. And no person is ever a waste of our time, but again, like I said earlier, we're not omnipresent. We're also not omnipotent. We don't have all the ability to be at all places at all times. So we do have to measure and wisely use the energy and the time that we invest in others. And so if you see somebody and you just go, they've been that forever and they're really not going to change unless I took all of my entire capacity and poured it into that one person, and you got to look at it and go, that's not good stewardship of my time. Are they worth it? Yes. Am I capable of it? No. So it's not about their value, it's about my capabilities. But if you see someone who's willing and wanting to, and they don't have a position or whatever, but they soak up everything you do, invest your time there. So it's, again, everybody's of value, but it's not of value to invest your time in everybody. I've got a 2-year-old grandson. It is not a good investment of my time to teach him how to drive right now. It's a waste of my time. Oh, your 2-year-old grandson, aren't you going to invest the time? Yeah, when he's 16, I'll invest the time, but not now. He's not ready for it yet. So you got to see the people that are ready for it and invest the best of your time in the people who are most ready to receive it. And then the others, as you just said, when they see that and that atmosphere starts to become a part of who you are, then those who are just next to that will start drawing in. And some never will. Some will always be the passive observer. I mentioned earlier, right, about the big churches where the passive people go, the small churches where the passive aggressive go, just so you know. They're not less passive, they're just passive aggressive.
Another question?
Kind of a two-part question, but I want to be quick. But first of all, I want to thank you guys for hosting this. We've been blessed, really, we've been blessed. I found you on Facebook. I invited a few friends from our fellowship to come be a part of it. Your church were great hosts, all of them. Walking in the parking lot, everybody was great. But 2 questions here real quickly here is, I've been pastoring for over 30 years. I've pastored 3 churches, and all my churches have been under 100. I co-pastored maybe 250 with a co-pastor. And you talk about thriving. You know, I pastor Praise Chapel in Chino, 80 to 90 people on a Sunday, 40 to 50 on a midweek. And
You have 50% showing up on a midweek. No megachurch does that. 50% come on a midweek. That's thriving.
amen.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to, you know, because sometimes we get up here, and like Pastor said, when you're at 400, you ain't second guessing counting. You love counting, but when you start dropping, you know, then you don't want to count. You don't want to know. How do you keep your church? You know, say you have 90, and then in a few months it's 50. You know, and the church questioning what's going on, there's something wrong. The pastor begins to, you know, look at himself. How do you get your church leaders and staff to keep thriving when you hit that little low point, to keep going forward? And the second question is about volunteers. We get the amens, let's do that, like somebody said, but nobody shows up for the meeting to put it together. How do you maintain a level? I think somebody said they don't call them volunteers here. Everybody's a minister. But how do you keep that volunteer? Because I get people signed up. The first couple of weeks, they're on early, they're on time. Then they start dropping the ball.
I can do the second one, the second question. Well, let me say something about attendance. One thing that we do here is every service starts on time. We start at 10 o'clock. We have started church in this building with 5 people in this room. 5.
Yeah,
And the worship team.
We've done it with more on stage than in the room. Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. And we have done that. And by the end of the third
Amen.
song,
Now you're preaching.
you know, it's full. You know, you've got 150, but you started with 5. So, but
Faith, every week. Faith.
But if you wait for them to show up, they'll keep showing up later.
That's right.
So,
exactly.
start on time.
And the mega churches have the same issue.
Yep.
The people don't come, you know, on time. On the volunteer issue, this is again what we learned from natural church development is you must have an assimilation process. There must be some way that a person who comes to your church can flow into ministry in your church, can get involved. So we learned that from natural church development, but it took us a while to find a system that worked for us. The one that we copied and modified and tweaked for a smaller scale came from, again, Church of the Highlands it's called Grow, but in Alabama. We found their system of having a person go through what is called growth track, and we even use the same terminology. We have growth track. But what we do, it's part of our culture. It's part of our belief. We believe in spiritual giftings. We believe in Romans chapter 9, Ephesians chapter 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 13, and 14. We believe that people have a special gift and they're wired a special way. We do our very, very, very best to find out how you're wired, and we do that through our growth track, which is only 3 Sundays. Our membership class is 1 Sunday, and they have 2 other Sundays that support the vision or the assignment. You can come to our church and in 3 weeks be involved and know what's going on. But in that process, our growth track, we test you. We do a spiritual gifts test. We do a personality test, and we try to find by talking to you what you're wired to do. If you're wired for children's ministry, we don't put you in the parking lot. Oh no, that could actually work. But if you're wired, for an example, if you are an introvert and you are a person that needs to be in the background and you want to do paperwork, you don't put them at the front door. They're going to chase people away. They're just not wired that way. We found this through natural church development and by accident. We kind of stumbled on it, that when people are doing what they're wired for, they personally have fulfillment and buy into it. And they commit more. They raise the bar. We have people in this church who come. Some of them come 2 times a week during the week to do stuff for their Sunday ministry. And it amazes me. But they're doing something that fulfills them. We have a man, he's not in this room, he's here today, his name is Ernie. And our entire church thrives around Ernie in one sense or another, because Ernie is a servant. He just loves to serve. And what he does, he's the first guy on the property, and most of the time he's the last guy off the property. I leave before he does. And he sets up our flags outside. He sets up our parking lot. He puts up some easy up tents to greet people outside. But it's also his gift. It's his anointing. So we do our very best to try to find where you work, what works for you. When we put somebody in a new ministry, we try to do a follow-up, like 30 days or 60 days later. How's it going? And if they hate it, let's move you somewhere else. We do our best not to just put a body in a place. Sometimes you have to, but we do our best not to. And that's like the attitude that you saw from the people here, and then that's not made up. That's them. That's their serve. They are getting fulfilled in doing this. They feel, I'm serving Jesus. I'm serving Jesus' people, and they're enjoying it. We do our best not to burn anybody out. We rotate children's ministries. We rotate nursery workers. We don't put somebody in there and they're there for life. We don't want someone leaving our church because they don't want to do that job anymore. We want them to be able to say, I don't want to do that job. Can I sit? So we work really hard at finding the right place. So I was dealing with the second issue. Question.
Yeah, on the first one, the up and downs of numbers, I actually put this in the new book, Small Church Essentials, which is available in the hallway for $10. I say that because my wife, the first question my wife will ask me when we talk tonight, she's going to be, did you mention the book? Because I never do. So she's going to ask me, and now I will never lie to her. Now I can actually tell her the truth. I mentioned the book. Okay.
And can I say, I've read his book, Small Church Essentials, and it's a fabulous book. It will be a great $10 investment. Fabulous.
Thank you. So what I mentioned in it about the numbers is, if you pastor a church of 50, here's a normal month. First Sunday you got your 50. Next month there's only 25 who show up. Anybody mad? No, it's flu season, or it's a holiday weekend, or name one of 1,000 reasons. You can go to 50, 25, no problem at all. Next week 75. Revival? No, you're baptizing somebody that day, and all their extended family showed up. But on that Sunday, your worship leader called in with the flu, so you're standing up there leading a cappella badly, and as you're doing it, you're looking at the biggest crowd you've had all year going, not one of these new people is going to show back up again. And next week, it's 50. Now, if a church of 5,000 went from 5,000 to 2,500 to 7,500 to 5,000, there's some serious problems going on. You don't have those swings. A 10% shift when you're dealing with 5,000 people is cause for concern, because that's 500 people. Right? That can be a real indicator, as you asked earlier, for the big church. They've got these leading indicators because the numbers allow the small percentages to matter and to give you indicators. But you can have massive numerical swings in a small church and don't mean nothing. So what you got to do is you just simply have to know small churches operate differently, even by our numbers fluctuations, than the big ones do. And once you know it, it's never easy to have those fluctuations, especially the downward ones, but it's helpful to know the reason why, and that it's fairly natural to have those swings in a smaller church.
Hi, my name is Rogelio. I'm a pastor in Riverside. We launched a church a year ago. I have a different problem. I get more people on Thursday than Sunday. So I've been thinking on, because we started Bible study on Thursday as pre-launching kind of excitement to Sunday. But until today, we get sometimes more people on Thursday. I've been thinking on closing Thursday to focus more on Sunday. Because apparently it feels like we're putting effort to make good Thursday home Bible study in a room in a church. But then Sunday is not getting as better as we want every Sunday. So my fear is closing Thursday and then getting even lower attendance on Sunday. Is there any advice that you can give me to think?
So you want to close the thing that's working really well?
No.
And work hard on the thing that's not working that well?
And that's I don't want to do that, but what I'm saying is I think our leaders are getting burnt out sometimes because of coming on midweek to do children's ministry, and then the same people do the same thing on Sunday. And we're struggling. I'm struggling as a pastor. I don't want to burn them out. And this is only 1 year.
Are all three of us on the same page on this one?
I think so. But
I'd close Sunday and keep Thursday. If you're going to close one of them, close the one that's not working. Sunday they did it in the early church, but there's no command to do it on Sunday. It's tradition. And if Thursday is when people are getting blessed and fed and prepared for ministry, and that's when they want to show up, and you can only do one of them.
But I would check as to what the thing is going on Thursday. Is it because of work schedules and the group that we're working, that happens to be the issue? Or is it because they're at other churches, they're trying you out and there's not a commitment? What are the reasonings? Because that could greatly affect that decision.
Yeah, very much so.
Are
Find
the
out the
people
reasons.
who are not showing up on Sunday, are they going to some other church on Sunday morning? Okay, yeah, I would look at the culture. I would look at the work schedule. I would look at why does Thursday work better for them? Ask them. Yeah. Find out. And if Thursday works, why not do Thursday?
Yeah.
Just a different way to think.
Yeah.
Another question. You guys have some easy ones.
Could you give some insight into what you think would be the appropriate balance of power in a small church of the elder board and senior pastor, meaning where the decision making should fall on certain issues for small churches like us?
I belong to a denomination that has certain structure to it, and they say that this is how things are supposed to go. It's not necessarily how we operate. Not in rebellion at all, but in practical giftings. Because we are a church that believes in giftings, that people work their gift, we believe in the gift of leadership. So our structure, we have a board of directors. And that board of directors is there because California says we have to. That's why we have them. They're there to oversee the legalities. Are we operating according to the laws of the land? They are a secular board over a corporation because the government of the California and the federal government say you have to have that. Running the church, we have a group of leaders. And we believe in leadership. So we have in our church, we have what we call our executive team. Our executive team is made up of about 6 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 people, and they meet a couple of times a month, and they're the ones that make the decision for the church. They are spiritual leaders in different parts of the church. We don't call them elders. We don't. A couple of them are pastors. We have 2 people that are pastors that are lay pastors. They're not paid position, but we recognize them as a pastor of our church, as one of them. And they have special giftings. One's very, very people oriented. Guess what he does? You know, his wife is here today, and he does counseling. He does encouraging. Another one is very, very administrative oriented. So he does more organizing side. So we try to get all of the people to find where their gift is. We meet regularly, and in that meeting, we all have an equal voice, but there can only be one head. You can't have more than one head. I'm not, I'm a believer that there is one person that has to, where the buck finally stops, and you have to make the decision and yes or no, whatever, after you've heard from everybody, and that's going to be the senior pastor. He needs to drive the church, direct the church, have the church go in that direction that God has assigned him to go. But he needs to be willing to listen to common sense, good support group, good leaders, and let those leaders speak and make a decision based off of being educated, for the church, but not compromising the message or the assignment, I call it.
The smaller the church, the more widely the authority of the church is going to be spread. And the larger the church, the more narrow, the smaller the group of people in authority are going to be. And I'm not saying that should be that way. I'm saying that is the way that's normative. That's typically it. It goes back to the whole thing I was joking with about earlier, the control freak. People in a smaller church expect to have a bigger say in the whole because they're only 1/50th of the church. Whereas if I'm 1/5000th of the church, I don't. My vote doesn't even matter whether I show up or not. So given that that's the case, that is typically how it works. So a part of understanding the relationships and the culture and the history of the church is what kind of input do people expect to have, and how do you respond to that in healthy and biblical ways and steer them out of unbiblical expectations of authority into biblical expectations of authority without, as I said earlier, again, being the control freak yourself. So it is not unusual or even necessarily wrong in a smaller church to have a third of the people serving on some kind of leadership teams. In my church, we got rid of the word committee completely. I won't use it because if you call it a team, they're more likely to act like a team. Committees tell other people what to do. Teams actually do the work.
Yeah, we use the word team.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing.
In our situation, our organization's different. So in our situation for us, like a board would be the district. And so the district are made up of pastors, working with pastors. We're pastor-driven, we're passive-supported. And so the pastor has a lot of say in the direction. But what we teach in the model is that, you want to find the people that are working. You don't find somebody that's not working and make sure they're on the board because then they think that's their ministry is to tell you what to do. You find people that are working, or as I say, rowing the boat, not rocking the boat, and then you use those people and you run things by them. You get their minds, and before you do anything major, you talk to them, and that's all part of creating leadership and creating momentum and ownership in what you're doing. So
yeah, it's way easier to turn a servant into a leader than turn a leader into a servant.
Right.
We only have a couple minutes at 2 o'clock. I said we'd end on time. I want to tell you something I think is profound. Are you ready? 2 simple words, okay? Pilot and, well, it's a phrase. We're going to call it a pilot program, or we're going to try something. Drop the phrase, God told me. When you say God told me to go to 2 services, and we're going to go to 2 services because God said to do it, and it doesn't work, they're going to say, they lose a tiny bit of respect for you. A tiny bit. If you say we're going to try, we're going to see how it works, or we're trying a pilot program. We went to 2 services over a year ago. According to all the books, our church should launch a 2nd service. according to all of the church growth wisdom and gurus, we were at the place, we were 80% full, we were a little more than 80% full, our rooms were, but I still saw that we had space. But according to them, you need to go to 2 services. So we talked about this for a long time, for several weeks in the leadership meeting that we had on our leadership team. And we decided we're going to go to 2 services. But what we told everybody is we're going to try it for 1 year. We're going to see how it goes. And we did it for 1 year. And we did. We went to 2 services for 1 year. And I made certain leaders attend both services because I needed some bodies in both services. And I needed you to be there. We did it for 1 whole year. At the end of the year, we evaluated. I went into the room where the leadership team was that decided a year earlier to go to 2. I went into that room and their evaluation, I didn't say a word for 45 minutes, and every one of them said why we have to stop 2 and go back to 1. And they all had really good, strong emotional feelings about it, good insight on it, good feedback from the congregation, and for us, it wasn't the right move at the time. And so we went back to 1 service and the church loved it. And the people loved it. For us, right now, 1 service works. It didn't work for us when we went to 2 and we tried. But we said, we're going to try. It was just, let's see how it goes. Versus, God has told the leadership team that we're going to 2 services and when we do, we're going to explode. And we had people working both services. We had teachers teaching at both, and people were starting to feel it and to get a little worn out. And our goal was by the end of 1 year, we would have enough people, new people, to staff both services. We didn't reach that goal, so we reverted back and went back to 1 service.
I wish you'd told me that, because your guests come over. I keep thinking when they come to our place, we refer them over to you. And now that I've been sending them, I'm sending them at the wrong time. So
okay. Yeah, we're at 10.
You've got to inform me. You got to inform me.
We do the same thing. We have not had a failed ministry in a decade because everything has an expiration date.
Right.
So if it doesn't work, it didn't fail. It just reached its expiration date, and we stopped doing it when we said we'd stop doing it. So anytime anybody comes up with a new ministry idea, I always ask, what's the expiration date? Well, we want to keep doing this forever. No. What's the expiration date? We're going to tell everybody we're doing this for the summer. We're doing it for a year. We're doing it for whatever the span is. And if at the end of it doesn't work, we make the assessment, nobody in the congregation is sitting there going, why did we stop doing that? We stopped it because it came to the end of its lifespan that we announced in advance it would be. And if it works, we just re-up. So there's no downside to it. There's no failure attached to it.
It saves you a lot of relationship expense with your congregation.
Same thing for leaders when you're trying to raise them up. You give them a project to see how it does. It has a beginning date. It has an end date. You don't put people immediately into leadership. You give them a project. If they are successful at that, or if they have problems, you get a chance to coach them through that and see whether or not they'll grow. So it's a great.
Now in our church we have now started a 2nd service, but it's Sunday at 5 o'clock. But that's a whole different story, a whole different vision, whole different direction, and I don't even teach it. That young guy standing against the wall, that guy right there, he's Pastor Josh. He teaches Sunday night. I teach Sunday morning. And we're doing something Sunday night is completely different than Sunday morning. It targets the 20 to 39-year-old is what it's targeting on Sunday night. I target the 11-year-old to the 111. So I go after everybody. It's 2:01. We said we would stop at 2 o'clock. A lot of you have a long ways to drive. I want to thank you guys for coming here today, and girls. Thank you guys and girls for coming today. I hope that this was worth your time, that we wanted to encourage you and tell you, you are valuable in Jesus Christ. You are important, and keep up the great work for Jesus. Thanks for serving in the kingdom of God.
Thanks again to Tom and the team, too. What a great job.